All right. Good evening. Hopefully everybody can hear me out there. Today we are here with Elder Baraka, and I will basically just allow him to introduce himself to you guys if you were not here on the week before last. If this is your first time, welcome to the Sankofa series. Our goal here is to look at the historical implications of the relationship between police and African American communities. And so every other week, we've come on to have various discussions about topics within the area of policing and policing the Black experience. So, Elder, if you would just introduce yourself however you see fit, and then I'll go into some conversation.
Well, first, let me thank you for allowing me to be a part of the conversation once again. My name is Ajamu Baraka. As been referred to, I guess I am an elder now. Sometimes one has to remind oneself of that fact because when you look in the mirror, you don't always see who you really are. Sometimes you see yourself as you were 25 years ago. But I'm glad to be here. Glad to be part of this conversation. Glad to be still part of this movement that we are all a part of, trying to build a new nation and a new world. I'm the national organizer for the Black Alliance for Peace. I've been in this struggle for this is my 49th year in this movement. The Black Alliance for Peace is an alliance of organizations and individuals committed to trying to reestablish or revive, if you will, the traditional Black internationalist element of our movement. We're part of what we see as the Black radical tradition. We make the connection between our struggles in the US and the struggles of African people and colonized people globally. We see some serious times. The contradictions that we know that we are facing in this country are contradictions that cannot be solvable within the context of the existing system. So hopefully tonight we get a chance to talk about how those contradictions look and what we need to do to address them in this country and as part of collective humanity. So I'm glad to be here.
On behalf of everybody here that's joined us and acknowledging that we're very fortunate to have local elders, people in our communities now who are able to school us. And but we also recognize that having you here with us today and adding only adds to what our audience can learn. I think is very important, and Sankofa is about understanding your past in order to move forward. So we have you here as somebody that's still doing the work, but someone that's been doing it for a long time. And those of us that are on this call today that are trying to do some of the work, we're interested in just hearing your take and your perspective. I think last week or the week before last, rather, I think it was perfect if folks that are out there didn't get a chance to attend. I think it kind of gave us a glimpse into who you are and the work that you do and your stance on things. One of the things that you did say in our last conversation that I can't get out of my mind, and I don't remember exactly how you said it, but you said in order to be effective, we must work within an organization. And I hope I quoted you correctly. But would you care to start off by expounding upon that and then speak on anything in particular that may have influenced you to join your first organization?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the theme. The theme is that the only way that we're going to be able to effectively address the conditions and impact on our people is through organization. As an individual, we can be concerned, we can be upset, we can desire certain things, but it's only through the organized processes that you're able to concentrate power. You've got to be able to move in a collective way. And I know that's sometimes difficult for people to completely accept because one of the things that they have been successful in sort of ingraining in many people in the U.S. is this notion of the individual, this ideal that through the efforts of some uh, great individual, usually a great man, that change comes about. And we can see how that's been used um, almost against us in many ways. I mean, for example, young people, when they talk about Dr. King, it's framed like, black folks were kind of laying around and just suffering. And then Dr. King came along and, and almost delivered us to freedom. Well, no, it's the opposite. That basically Dr. King was produced out of our struggle, out of our movement building activity. Dr. King was ended up being a spokesperson for the Montgomery Improvement Association in Montgomery, Alabama, that was largely led and executed by black women. Okay, so the movements produces individuals, produces the people, and sometimes what happens is that our enemy would take those individuals sometimes and use them against us. Convince us that the only way we can make progress is when we are delivered up by some individual. No, we say that the way we make progress, the way we translate vision into reality is through organization. Okay, so that's the only way we can move, folks. That's the only way we can transform our conditions. It's when we build power, and the only way you build power is when you build organization.
Now, thank you for that. And I honestly, I'll be honest with you, I've struggled with that when I first kind of got into joining organizations and being a part of structured attempts to do work. And I got burnt out on it. I think that what we had were, or what I was a part of, rather, were probably organizations that were not ready to take on the tasks that they thought they were ready to take on. And I bring that up because now I've been more open to joining organizations. I kind of slacked off and have been really kind of looking at myself as a Black history vigilante or assassin, so to speak, where I would just go to anywhere I could and do the work on my own, like you said, as an individual. But now it seems that it's a very good time to get organized, which is a very interesting thing that's going on in our city right now here in Louisville. Since this summer's uprisings, there's been so many organizations to emerge or even to reemerge, organizations that we hadn't heard from in a while. Um, but these organizations don't always see eye to eye, and they don't always collaborate or co-organize. One of the things that it seems like the Black Alliance for Peace is about is bringing people together for those reasons. I've heard of this term called the narrow strip of unity. Brother Howard Fuller uses it, and really talking about how we can come together on small issues that we agree about. What's your take on that and the need to not only to organize, but to co-organize amongst organizations also?
Well, I think that, as we just said, building organizations are important. That's how you concentrate power. And the way you concentrate power even more is when you build a coalition of organizations. The challenge, of course, becomes, what would be the basis of that unity, the basis of the coalition. Sometimes it can be quite difficult, but it's a difficult struggle that we have to engage in. What we have to do is to struggle through what we see as the main objectives at any point in history, and what are the common interests that we might identify. And that sometimes is the result of a real struggle, because sometimes we have, now sometimes, in many cases, we have people who are seeing things quite differently, people who have contrary and sometimes contradictory interests. And so part of building organizations and building the basis for unity is to engage in honest conversations, honest struggle to find if there's a basis for building a coalition. Sometimes it may not exist, and that's just part of the objective assessment you have to make.
So, can you think of a time just off the top of your head where you've been involved with an organization that may not agree with yours on one topic, but may agree on with you on another, and you all were able to work together?
Plenty of times, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, even the work we're doing with the Black Alliance for Peace. We have a perspective on what needs to be done in terms of putting a break on U.S. Aggression globally. We have a perspective on what that means domestically within the U.S. In terms of the role of the police forces. But we know that we have some people who have a different idea about the police forces. I mean, for example, we have people who we know are committed to the idea of abolition, and that's a great idea. We think that makes sense. We want to abolish the police also, but we also understand that the police are part of a state apparatus, and that they're not going to voluntarily just disband. That comes about as a consequence of when the people are able to take power for themselves and restructure institutions, including policing, either to eliminate it or have different kinds of police forms. But even though we may have different ideas about what that transition might look like, we have instead been able to still combine with other organizations that we are in agreement with other issues related to things like the Department of Defense 1033 program, the program that they have used to militarize police forces across the country. We can identify that as a common basis for cooperation, and that eclipses any other differences we might have. So yes, we that's part of the organizational challenges that we have to face as we build movement. And sometimes it could be a stumbling block, but often when you find a way to identify some common interest, then the result can be quite valuable when you're able to really concentrate your organizational power.
Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful message, especially for our crowd here in the city of Louisville. And coming for you is important. And that's for everybody out there. Just remember that there's a lot of work to be done. There's enough work that's spread around. There's never work that's going to run out. And so why not work together with organizations that you are able to work with when there's a theme or an issue that is important to you both. Another thing also that you had mentioned, and we kind of got into this in our last discussion, our last conversation. And again, my thing here is to try to learn as much as I can from you, but also for everybody out there listening to be able to learn more about their roles in organizing, be it as protesters or organizers, activists, or the like. And so we kind of had that conversation the week before last when you were on. But what is your take on the various roles in the movements that you've been in? So, in other words, the roles that you have seen important, and how does an individual decide or feel their way into a particular role in a movement?
That's an interesting question. It really kind of depends on the individual. Part of the question you asked me a little bit earlier was, what brought me to movement,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's an individualized, sort of experience. And for me, it was growing up on the south side of Chicago, being exposed to a lot of different kinds of ideals and experiences. At the time that I was coming into consciousness, you had the Black Panther Party organizing, and you had, which now everybody's more aware of, Chairman Fred Hampton, who was building the party in Chicago.
Okay.
And, his language, his approach, because he was someone who understood the streets and could talk to knuckleheads like me, it resonated. At the time, though, that moment, because I was so deeply part of street life and such a knucklehead, I wasn't able to completely commit to the call he made when he said, uh, "I am a revolutionary."
Okay.
Because when you claim yourself as a revolutionary, that means is not just the words; it means the transformation of your life. It means you have to carry yourself self a certain kind of way. You got to project the values of the revolution. You've got to embody the best of our people. So that didn't happen for me until another 4 years later in 1972, when I ended up in the military. And at that point, really understanding some things and committed myself to being a revolutionary, seeing all of the contradictions at that point. So it's an individual kind of thing, and because of my particular experiences, you know, it was not only committing to revolution, but committing to a certain kind of revolution. One, understanding that we had to have complete and complete change. That we had to look at the issue of race and racial oppression, but we also had to connect that to issues of class. So it set me on a certain kind of direction in terms of my politics. So many people that we talk to, many people today, who, for example, coming into our formation, in particular the young ones, they are coming into our formation because they are attracted to the politics, but the politics that they're attracted to are politics that represent an analysis that seems to make sense to them. They can see that there's not much that this system has to offer them, that there is no so-called American dream, that the system is rotten to its core, that the only way that we're going to be able to build a new world is when we take power from these criminals that have the power in the US, in Western Europe. So there's a kind of radical core of young people. I'm talking about folks between 18 and 28. That's, I think, different than what we've seen in quite some time. And many of them are coming into radical formations because they are coming to terms with the realities that this system is unable to address their material needs, and that this system is organized against their very lives. So that's the basis we see now for the radical movement that we're building here in this country.
Man, I appreciate that also. And it just kind of got me thinking about how right now in the city, as I said earlier, we don't have a shortage of people who are interested, or at least who claim to be interested in doing the work. I think sometimes maybe as organizations, what I see is that we often times have issues of utilizing uh, human capital in the right way. In other words, recognizing what people's talents are. And you made a good point or interesting point about the state of mind that you have to be in order to be down with this revolution. And you said that you yourself was a knucklehead. I like that term. How do you think we embrace the knuckleheads nowadays? How do we, the people that were at where you were when you first came into consciousness, how do we, for lack of a better term, make good use of that energy and that particular talent?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, and we have to engage all components of our people.
Yes.
And, those young brothers and sisters out there that are struggling, who are unemployed, who see the only way to really make it is to, they forced into doing stuff that the system will identify as being illegal. Um, we've got to find ways to engage them, to help people to understand that while the objective of survival is understandable, at the same time, though, we have to understand that we can't just survive. That we got to have a vision that suggests that we can do better than this collectively. That these kind of conditions don't have to be handed down to our kids and our grandkids. That we can make a break with this system, and we have the examples of our ancestors who engaged the system, who made changes, who almost pulled off a revolutionary break back in the 1960s and 1970s. We have to see ourselves as part of a global revolutionary process. So, that building that kind of awareness and consciousness is a process because, the immediate necessities, they bear down on you. And so when people are coming and talking all this grandiose stuff about the world and building new societies and stuff, it's like, it may not resonate, but you struggle because you see some of the most effective organizations we've ever built. They've been built on the basis of being grounded in the working class, in the unemployed, in the quote unquote knuckleheads, okay, who got won over, who transformed themselves and their consciousness. So we can't dismiss any sectors of our population. So it takes patience. It takes, again, operating from an organization. It takes cultural competence to be able to engage folks. But we have no other choice but to attempt to do it because we've got to have an organized movement. And to have an organized movement, we've got to find ways to be able to bring in all sectors of our population, especially these young folks who in fact can make up the warrior class of our people.
Yes, sir. I was thinking about trauma. I do a little violence prevention work also, and a lot of the individuals that I find myself working with, it can be frustrating, but I think part of it is that they often are dealing with trauma that maybe they don't know about, and then so it made me wonder, like within the movement, if people come from a certain lived experience, they may and probably do experience trauma that they bring with them into the organization. How do you suppose that organizations can work with that or deal with that?
Well, that's you're right. That's a reality, and the way you deal with that is that people have to understand that the individual trauma cannot be dealt with individually. So you have to deal with this in a collective way. People have to be sort of trained, if you will, into understanding that they have to build trust. They've got to talk about what they have been experiencing. You have to have processes within your organization where you all can share your experiences. You can unpack the trauma of your lives and collectively deal with those issues. Because look, there's still data that is still being developed that is looking at what kind of traumatic impact is it on our young people to be exposed to all of these murders of our people by these killer cops. What kind of impact is it having on consciousness? Okay, I think that there's some deep trauma here that we've got to deal with. So yeah, we've got to understand that we've got to deal with this stuff collectively. In one way, and Frantz Fanon talked about it. Frantz
Mm-hmm.
Fanon, the revolutionary from Martinique, who was part of the revolution in Algeria,
Sure.
he talked about that the one way in which the oppressed become, if you will, sane is when they resist. When they resist the enemy, when they recognize that the enemy can also bleed, that the enemy can suffer. Okay. Now, so it's, part of how we repair ourselves is when we, in fact, build effective opposition. That's how we reassert our dignity as a people. When we resist, when we see the results of our resistance. One of the things that happened this last summer is, and I wonder if people recognize it. There were people all around the country begging white folks to take down the Confederate flag and
Mm-hmm.
take down statues and all this kind of stuff. As soon as the people went to the streets, as soon as people started burning down police stations and all of this, white folks across the country was like, overnight, oh, we're going to take down the Confederate flags. We're gonna take Aunt Jemima off the off the pancakes and Uncle Ben's.
Uncle
I mean, they were
Ben,
like
yeah.
they were giving up everything. Okay, and we saw the same thing when we started burning down cities back in the 1960s and 70s. That basically they start giving all kinds of concessions because they want to maintain their stuff. Okay, and so we understand that when we resist, when we have effective movement, we make progress. Okay, so that's how you build. That's how you reassert your dignity. And when people start seeing that, the police can be scared too. Then you start winning people over to your side. When people start understanding that we don't need the police in our communities, we can, in fact, take on the responsibility of public safety in our communities ourselves. Look, we all know in our communities, I say basically, we can clean up so called crime in about 2 weeks.
Mhm.
You know why? We all know who's doing what. We all know who the stick up people are and who specializes in going in folks' house and all of this kind of stuff. We could clean that up in a minute. But the issue is it ain't that easy because when you start dealing with people's money, especially the folks who are involved in other kind of crime like drugs and stuff,
Mhm.
you're not just dealing with them. You got to deal with the police because in many cases it's the police that's protecting them. Okay. So, objectively, when you start organizing in our communities, we start building revolutionary processes. You don't even have to be worried about public safety because it transforms the people. People stop engaging in internalized violence. Okay, it all dissipates. In every revolutionary experience around the world, when the people go into resistance, when they begin to transform themselves, the first thing that disappears is this issue of so-called crime. Okay. So
Mhm.
these are the messages we've got to get across to our folks, you know. But the only way you really learn this kind of stuff is through practice. We start really building effective organizations and bringing in all the elements of our communities in those organizations.
Yeah, man, I definitely appreciate that. Quick question: have you been following the Chauvin case and the opening remarks and all of these things going on up in Minnesota?
You can't get past it. I mean, it's every place. Yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay, so I just kind of want to just give you the open floor for that, and just to kind of speak on what you've seen thus far, and what you may anticipate going on, and then maybe even how we can brace for it.
Well, I mean, it's an interesting kind of thing because personally, I have issues around this whole concept of justice and whether or not this system can, in fact, render something we call justice. Because the system is organized, and the police and the courts and the prisons, they are organized to do exactly what they do. Okay, so this notion that there's a possibility of something called justice is a tricky thing because what it kind of implies, Deontay, is that first it kind of legitimizes the system. You see, many of us see ourselves as colonized people, and so we are opposed to the colonizers and their system. We see no legitimacy in their system, in their forms of governance and administration. We believe that our people have to have that kind of emotional and psychological distance from the colonizer. So
Mm.
any efforts that give the impression that the colonizer and their system can in fact render something called justice is something we've got to be very, very careful with. Many of us reject that. Even when in a case like this, that there's a possibility that this police person may end up getting convicted of third degree, second degree murder, or third degree manslaughter. The system will give him up when it needs to in order to perpetuate the myth that it can render justice. Okay. So I'm seeing, that the prosecution is getting a lot of play, of course, because everybody's sort of mobilized and hate this individual who basically murdered George Floyd. We all been exposed. Well, not me, because I don't watch this stuff. Because
Yeah,
basically, you looking at a snuff film, and see again, you got to be the one to protect your consciousness. You know, so I'm at. I don't want to be triggered by this that I can't do anything. Okay, besides what we do. So I
right.
don't watch it. I go to a certain point and I stop looking at it. So I'm the issue is if this is a judgment on the justice of the U.S. And that's the way it's being framed, that the U.S. is
Uh,
on trial, they say. Well, if the idea is that they're going to convict this individual, is that supposed to like reinforce the system? I don't know about that, because basically for everyone like him that gets sacrificed, you got 50 and 100 others that don't get no charges, don't get anything. So what about that situation? It continues, but we're just more confused.
all right, and then it's weird. It's a weird situation to be in because obviously we want to see some level of retribution
Accountability.
for or accountability, even better term.
Yeah.
Not only for that individual, but for every individual wearing a badge that could have stopped it. And it
Exactly.
seems like even if that happens, and seems like what I'm hearing you say, and it makes sense to me, that we can't count on. It says nothing about justice in the future. It doesn't guarantee that things are better or that America got it right or something like that. It's just a sacrifice almost. In other words, but some of us would like to see that. We would like to see the
Yeah.
sacrifice, no matter how small it may turn out to be. But
And that's all
this
right.
takes me
And
into oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm
And
sorry.
that's all right. That's all right. And then I'm not suggesting we don't raise the contradiction. We don't demand accountability. We cannot allow these criminal elements wearing badges to come into our communities and execute our folks. So we resist. We demand that the system that pretends that it has the ability to render justice, that it in fact addresses these cases. We definitely do that. But while we do that, at the same time, we have no illusions. We understand that we might be able to put pressure on them to win some justice for one of these cases, but that we know that the relationship between the colonized police forces and ourselves, it continues. So we win in this case, but what happens next week? Okay.
All right.
Until we change that relationship between the colonizer and the colonized, then we are always vulnerable. There's always going to be more Breonna Taylors and everybody else.
Man, so with that being said, I'd hate to even bring it down to ask this, but what is the use of diplomacy then for the organizations, for the people organized against police repression or police murder? How can we get real justice um, using diplomacy, or can we? Is it time to throw that out the window, or maybe do some organizations have to abide by that and others don't? How do you see that?
Well, when you say diplomacy, what do you mean by that?
And maybe that's probably not the right term. I guess what I'm saying is not only nonviolence, but I guess being at the table with individuals, maybe lawmakers, officials, and coming to some sort of agreements or our people being in on some lawmaking. That's kind of what I mean versus vigilanteism or the like.
Or insurrection? Yeah,
Or
yeah.
maybe not or insurrection, maybe and insurrection, but that's kind of the question I'm asking. Like, is insurrection the only answer, or can insurrection somehow be diplomatic?
Well, it's difficult to have diplomatic insurrection, of course, but
Right.
what I hear in your question is that uh, do we, is it fruitless to engage the system to be engaged in these conversations with the representatives of the state to try to bring about some degree of some alterations in how the state might operate, the police forces, the jails, prisons, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and I say, no, yeah, we engage them, okay? But again, you have no illusions. You ain't negotiating and engaging anything if they know you don't have some power behind you. If you don't have a real base, then all they will string you along, they'll play you, they'll allow you to go on television and talk about like you raising some cane and you represented the people and all this kind of stuff. But they know you ain't doing nothing, you know. In fact, you just propping up the system. You engage the system when you got an organized force behind you. And that's when you get some concessions. Okay. So again, it's not having any illusions about what it is you're engaged in. And it also keeps on coming back to this issue of independent political power.
Okay.
If you're not building and don't have independent political power, then basically, you know, you can't even engage in negotiation or diplomacy because you just front and they know you front. And that's what's so damaging, you know?
Mhm. And so I want to leave you with this question or comment, and then I'll remind the people that we'll have a few minutes open for questions from the cyber world out there. But the last thing that you just spoke about was kind of the need for us to certainly be organized and to be able to come to the table with meaningful ideas and representation. Um, one thing that's growing that I see a lot of now, and I'm sure you see it as well, is the prevalence of white allyship in this movement.
Mhm.
And you can come to Louisville at any given moment and go down to the square or anywhere else where people are protesting, and you will see a lot of whites there. Not only that, but um, I have even seen an increase, or at least increase in certain students, taking my classes and wanting to know more. So, is there a need for embracing white allyship? Is there a certain way that we should embrace that? I tell you, like a perfect example. I saw a group of white people. They threw up the fist, and one of my boys was like, "I don't like that." You know what I'm saying? That fist is ours. So, what do you take of the white allyship and where that's going?
Well, that's been a perennial question among our movement. And the way I see it is that, again, when you have independent political organization, independent political power, then you can build allies in all kinds of communities and with all kinds of communities. So, white folks who support your demands, who support your objectives, if they want to support that and be down with struggle, for me, that's fine, as long as they understand who's running things. Okay.
Okay.
When they start trying to speak for us, then we got an issue. And the other issue that we've always dealt with is, we want you to be down and support us and all that kind of good stuff. Okay. And you can come out to the rallies and the marches and all that. But you know what, white folks? What about organizing other white folks?
Hmm.
The source of these problems are coming not from us, they're coming from your folks. Okay. What are you doing to organize to reverse that? One of the reasons why Donald Trump made the kind of inroads he made in his movement in this country is because he tapped into sectors of the white population that nobody was speaking to besides the radical right.
Hmm.
And the radical right was all they were doing was confusing these white folks. And so, Donald Trump came along and continued with the confusion. But if you got white leftists and radicals, why aren't they in the white communities dealing with winning white folks over to progressive struggle? Okay. So don't just be all up in our stuff, you know. Take the responsibility of organizing your own folks also.
Yes,
That's
sir.
been our message.
I told a group of my white colleagues one time that just holler at your racist cousin. I know you got at least one.
Right.
I don't think they appreciate that. But I'm gonna stop right there, man. It's been such a good time. It's almost 7:30. Sister Chanel, do you have any questions or comments from folks out there in the cyber world that want to chime in or ask questions to the Elder Baraka? You're on mute.
Yeah, I see that. No, actually, I do not have any. What I think is coming up for a lot of people, and you kept naming some things here. What is going on the streets, and in the community of what is post uprising of Louisville, is people really getting to understand that the notion of Black liberation, the same as Black Lives Matter, is not only a hashtag and is not only something that just can be presented on social media. You can take pictures all day with your fist in the air and you can get candid posts or whatever and as many likes as you want to. But are you doing the necessary work that it is going to take for us? And when we say us, our people, we are talking about Black people to bust down these mechanisms of white supremacy where they are. And then are we organizing ourselves, building that power base to be able to be just as the elder just said, organized to take on. And I love that you use diplomacy. Actually, I mean that's exactly what we've seen, to take on the diplomacy that is necessary if that's what you choose to do. Because there are other spaces in which we can build, and not all of those is having everybody be at a table, and not all of those is having everybody be in the street, and not all of those are not being able to gatekeep, I mean, bust down the gates that are gate caps around who is moving and doing what. And I'm glad that we lifted a lot of that up. And I think it sat well with a lot of people. And for people who've missed it, they can go back and they can watch it. And it will sit well with them because they have been asking and questioning that. And I think what is missing from the Louisville landscape are the elders who have done this work and a place for them to be able to name some of this work because of so many suit and ties that continue to just overarch into what Black liberation actually is. And so I think that's what people are sitting with. In the recent weeks, and like I just said, we just ended our legislative session yesterday. We barely got, of course, a no more no knock bill to totally eliminate the intrusion of the state into your home, and doing whatever they want to, right? We even have everybody's favorite president all of a sudden, Biden, sending in an amicus brief that is stating, of course not us, Deontay, that is stating that it is okay to enter somebody's house if they are armed. And once again, this insurrection of January 6th cannot be lost on us this year to know that we are definitely in a multi tiered system in the US, and it plays out every day. Every day, we are seeing a different justice system adjudicate white people and other folks outside of what that adjudication looks like for Black folks. So, no, you are not mistaken. When we are looking for justice, it will not sit here in the US, not in its current form. I don't even think justice exists, actually. I was loving going down that rabbit hole with the justice conversation because it does get a bit confusing for folks, especially, coming up in the public school system, entering into post secondary education or even the secondary education where there's this fanciful and whimsical world of like how justice can be found if we just follow these things. And luckily, 2021 was able to bring that on its head. So I'm thankful for those things that were raised as well. I'm also thankful for the work around what white people need to do, and what white folks also need to know is they have to do their own healing. What that looks like for white people, I do not know, but I know what it looks like for us. So don't look towards Black folks to try to heal you. Heal on your own, and however y'all can do that. But you do need to ask yourself, what are you doing to bring down white supremacy, and why do you feel so comfortable to sit in it if you are not doing that? And I think those were some very critical things that were brought up today.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to the next conversation. Whenever that happens, we said that we would potentially do a panel discussion about the impacts of neoliberalism, liberalism, especially in the face of the case of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, for that matter. And
Yeah.
So everybody out there, I think one of the things I took away from this conversation is about self-awareness. If you are interested in being an organizer and activist, a white ally even, that you should be self-aware, and that also the organizations that accept you should be aware of who you are and what you bring to the table, so they could place you properly and give you the proper work in the role that you need to have. Did either of you want to offer closing remarks before we part ways?
I just say very briefly, thanks again for allowing me to be part of this conversation. I really admire all the work that folks are doing, and I hope that we can do this once again pretty soon.
I'm gonna do a plug real quick. Definitely follow the Elder Ajamu Baraka and the Black Alliance for Peace. We're going to continue to keep bringing. I know it's cracking me up and making me laugh when he was like, "Oh, I'm an elder." That's right, because the kids started doing that to us too. As soon as the uprising came, they were like, "Well, you're the elder. We want to know." And I'm like, "Child, I just got here." So so yeah, it is a bit funny, especially when we talk about organizing and what kind of duty that is to organize here. But yeah, we want to bring in more of our elders from the Black Liberation Movement, so people can really start feeling a bit groundedness. We think that that's going to really help with a lot of the healing process that needs to happen, the centering process. If it's new to you, make sure it's a practice that you can take in. I just want to name, I understand that, like, reading things right now is hard, and that is a lot of our work. Being able to know the education, recite the education, and pass that education on. So be thankful for the Sankofa series. This is what it's here for, to have that political education while trying to heal. And we'll see you all in 2 weeks, right?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay, cool. All right. Thank y'all.
All right. Thank you,
Thank you.
Elder.
Thank you. Appreciate it.